We are now in the midst of phase one for Mars protocol. Now the question is, should you be taking part in phase one? Should you be taking part in phase two? What's the best way to play this? Well, in this video, we're going to be discussing exactly that and what I will personally be doing with my own money. But for starters, welcome to Crypto Saver. Let's first kind of briefly go over what Mars is. So Mars is going to be a credit protocol, meaning that anyone can deposit an asset into Mars to receive a yield if someone wants to borrow it, or if you're looking to borrow money and you want to put down collateral, you should be able to put down any sort of collateral. The only sort of borrowing and depositing that we have within Terra right now would kind of be located within Anchor, right? That if you do want to borrow money, you have to have B Luna to do so. That's the only collateral that's being accepted. Well, the idea with Mars is that you would be able to put something else as collateral, maybe an Astro token, for example, maybe ANC tokens and so forth. And what's really cool about Mars, so when you typically deposit an asset to borrow against it, that's referred to as, they refer to it as contract to borrow, right? So if you are collateralizing, let's say B Luna, right? Contract to borrow. Now what Mars is doing, which is really cool, they're introducing something known as contract to contract borrowing. And that's why a lot of people are very hyped up about this, because this allows you to really leverage the sort of strategies that you're doing within Terra. And to explain how contract-to-contract borrowing would work, imagine right now, so for example, I have a B Luna pool set up, a liquidity pool that I'm earning a return on, right? Whenever people are trading in and out of that pool. Well, I can actually provide the LP tokens for B Luna on Mars. And if I were to do so, provide those LP tokens as collateral, I could actually borrow against it. Meaning I do not have to like withdraw my Luna or my B Luna out of let's say Astro, that's what the current LP is. I do not have to withdraw those tokens and kind of provide them as collateral with Mars. No, I would actually just be able to keep that liquidity pool the way it is and collateralize that contract with Mars and borrow money against it. So you could just imagine how much leverage you can actually take upon yourself by doing so. And again, they refer to that as contract to contract borrowing. And I think a lot of people really enthusiastic about that, because I mean, I'm sure it opens up a world of opportunities in terms of like yield farming and so forth. So let's move on to what's happening with phase one and phase two. Now, this shouldn't be new to some of you. We've kind of seen Astroport actually go through something very similar to this. And as we look right now, we have phase one, the Lockdrop, right? And this will go on for about a week or so. Today is the first day of it. And in the first 5 days, we have the opportunity to deposit UST into the Lockdrop. And on the last 2 days, the 6th and the 7th, we would only be able to withdraw UST out of this vault. And about 50 million Mars tokens are going to be distributed during the course of this Lockdrop. So a couple things to keep in mind here. You do not have to rush to get into this Lockdrop. Even if you're the first person or the last person on day 5 to deposit UST, that will not change the amount of tokens you will receive. Now, the more money that's being deposited within Mars right now would mean that you'd receive less and less tokens, because your UST out of a percentage of all the UST would be less and less, so you receive less percentage of all those Mars tokens. So right now we can see there's about $11.5 million deposited within the Lockdrop, which is a lot, by the way. I believe Prism basically had a similar one just 2 weeks ago, and I think after after 5 days or so, I'm going off memory here, but I think they got up to like 15 million or something, and they really kind of like racked up the last 2 days or so. But to be at 11.5 million just in the first less than 24 hours, that's actually pretty insane. Like I wouldn't be surprised if this actually gets to like 30 or 40 million. It's that crazy. Now, a couple things to keep in mind here. So if we come here and we lock the UST, so let's look at a few things they tell us. First 5 days, depositing and withdrawing is allowed. Okay, we know that. After day 6, we can withdraw once, up to 50%. And on the final day, like less and less. Okay, we understand all that. Let's just go forward here. So as we toggle this along, kind of obviously displays the UST that's in my wallet. We notice this thing over here, which is set lock end date. Now, this is important for us. Now, when you provide UST into this pool, into this Lockdrop, you do not lose that UST. You actually will receive that UST back at a further date. We can set it for as minimum as 3 months or for as long as 18 months. Now, the longer out you go, the more tokens you will receive up front. So notice if we use, let's say 100 UST, and we go to 3 months, we would receive 40 tokens as opposed to 591 tokens. I mean, that's like what, almost it's like 12, 13x more. Humongous difference, right? Humongous difference. In both cases, we would get our UST back. Now, it's also important to note that when that UST is deposited within that Lockdrop, and while you're waiting, let's say 12 months to receive a UST back, you will be earning a yield on that UST. Now, what that yield will be, no one knows, but it will be used as part of their overall project, right? Where people can borrow or deposit assets and so forth to earn a yield. It will come down to what the demand is. Is there a demand for people borrowing UST on Mars? The greater the demand, the higher the interest rate that the depositors would be getting paid here. So it's really impossible to know how much you would, but keep that in mind. That is kind of a little additional perk you do get in the meantime. Other than that, again, once we go through this and we lock our UST, we will receive our Mars tokens. Now let's head over to phase 2. So phase 2 is a Mars UST bootstrapping pool. So this is Mars's attempt to set up the liquidity pool for their token, and during this process, they will also figure out the right price for their token. If you deposited UST into phase 1, the tokens that you have, the tokens that you would be given, the Mars tokens, you will be allowed to use them during the Mars UST bootstrapping pool phase 2. You can either deposit UST during this pool, or you could deposit Mars tokens. Now, depending on how much Mars and how much UST is being deposited will actually determine the price that Mars token will end up trading at on day 1. Obviously, if there's a lot of UST being deposited into this bootstrapping pool, it would mean that the Mars token should be worth more, so keep that in mind. At the same time, there is an airdrop coming out for Luna stakers. The Mars tokens, as part of that airdrop, will also be available to you to deposit during phase 2. Additional points to note here. If you deposit just one asset, so for example, just your Mars tokens, then when this phase ends, you will have a 50-50 share of the liquidity pool, right? A UST, a Mars pool, for example, and your assets will be split between that, right? So you will end up having some Mars tokens and some UST tokens. So one would get traded for the other to be part of that LP. And now Mars does give you a little bit of a bonus if you do take part in phase 2. And they say right here that you'll get a one-time Mars reward for taking part, and these tokens will unlock literally over 30 days after phase 2 closes. Okay, so every single day you can come in and you could withdraw some of those bonus tokens that you were given for taking part in phase 2. Now, outside those reward tokens, for either the UST or for the Mars tokens that you locked into phase 2, those will be unlocked over the course of 3 months. Okay, so on a daily basis, over the course of 3 months, that is when you can pull those out. Now that we had a brief overview, so I'm going to cut straight into my recommendation here, and then we're going to explain why I came to this conclusion. Now, I recommend, again, obviously not financial advice or anything, you could do your own due diligence. I could be completely wrong about what I have to say here, but I would recommend that you do take part in phase 1. You lock it up, you basically lock up your UST for as much as possible, but you do not take part in phase 2. And I'm going to show you why. Let's head over to Astroport. So for Astroport phase 1, it required us actually depositing our LP into Astroport. So if you're providing liquidity on Terra swap, you can migrate your LP tokens from Terra swap over to Astroport. And I did just that. I took my Luna LP tokens, I migrated them over to Astroport, and for that I was given a one-time bonus. When phase 2 began, we were able to either provide Astro tokens or provide UST, the same way we kind of see phase 2 for Mars, right? Now, I took my Astro tokens that I received for providing the assets in phase 1, I took them, I threw them into phase 2, and I also took my airdrop, by the way, and I also threw it into phase 2. And in doing so, yes, I did get a little bit of a bonus Astro tokens. And as we look here right now, I do have unlockable liquidity, right? So obviously it's been getting unlocked slowly over time. There's 34 days until it completely unlocks and I could withdraw it and so forth. But all this time, it's been over 2 months now. All those Astro tokens that I received for participating in phase 1 and basically even participating in phase 2, I mean, I've been waiting for those to be unlocked. And let's go take a look at the chart of Astro. So here's the daily chart for Astro. So on the day that basically they fully launched, their token came out at a price of $2.71. Today, those same tokens are trading for 73 cents, okay? Look at this candle on day 1. Look at this dump that occurred, right? Then we saw a little bit of buying pressure, but either way, we went from $2.71 to 73 cents. I mean, that's a crazy, crazy drop. We're talking about a quarter, right? It dropped 75%. So I basically ended up locking up all those Astro tokens that I received for participating in phase one, and also the ones I got from the airdrop. I took all of those. I locked them into phase two, where I basically say, well, I'll get some of them on a daily basis. But in the meantime, the value of those Astro tokens lost 75% of their value. Now, yes, I did get a small batch of bonus tokens for participating in phase two, but it was nothing compared to how many I kind of had to begin with. If I think about it, if I take what I got from the airdrop and what I got from phase one, I think it was something like, off the top of my memory, maybe like 150, 200 tokens or so. And then I got maybe 35 tokens for locking them up in phase two. 35 tokens. So sure, I gained a bit more tokens, but all the tokens dropped by 75%. I mean, mathematically, of course, it would have made so much more sense for me to have never locked up into phase two and to have basically had sold on day one. And that ties into what I would recommend you do the same thing for Mars. The smart people are not going to be participating in phase one and then also participating in phase two. That doesn't make any sense, because just like Astroport, there's also going to be an airdrop. And we know what the issue of airdrops are. Many people receive an airdrop and they just simply dump it on the market. And come launch day, which is March 7, people can trade right out of that airdrop, okay? We're going to have all that selling pressure. At the same time, people that participated in phase one but did not participate in phase two can also dump their tokens on March 7. Until we're proven otherwise, we have to look historically, and we have seen that alts on Terra have not performed well. We've tried different approaches. So far, nothing has truly seemed like it's going to change the tide in terms of how things perform. And the best thing that we can compare this launch to, like a phase one and a phase two, would be what Astroport did. And even in that case, we saw Astroport ended up losing 75% of its value in less than 2 months, right? I mean, just from December 28th to, what is it here, like February 7, I mean, like a month and a half or so. I mean, it more than 75% of value loss. So it's going to happen here also, unfortunately. We have that airdrop coming through. We're basically given essentially free tokens on phase one. Like it is free tokens. It is free tokens, right? Because you get that UST back. We're going to have selling pressure from that. We're going to have selling pressure from the airdrops. And again, I try to be upfront with you guys, obviously, and I would love to sit here and say that I think we should, take these Mars tokens and lock them into phase two and hold them with diamond hands, but I just do not see that happening. I think Mars is a phenomenal project. There's no doubt about it. And keep in mind, there's a big difference between a project and its token, right? Some people can love Tesla and Tesla cars, but they may not love the stock, because these are two separate things, right? So even if you're a huge believer in Mars and think it's going to bring so much adoption to Terra and introduce so many new interesting little tactics, which all of that, I do think so. It does not necessarily mean that you have to be completely bullish on the token, at least in the way tokens have been trading on Terra and even across all different blockchains. Ultimately, it comes down to what's going to give you the best ROI. If you lock up 100 UST, let's say for the maximum 18 months, right? And I'm just going to quickly go, let's say Anchor pays at 20%, and let's say you deposit $100. Let's say you make 100, and let's say you would have 130, so you make about $30 of profit. Let's say on a $100 deposit from Anchor over the course of 18 months, right? So 30%. So you'd have to figure out, okay, if I lock up my USD for that long, and if I also participate in phase two and I wait that long and I decide not to sell my tokens, well, the question is, whatever it might be 18 months later, would you be able to sell those tokens that you received for basically like a 30-cent profit on top, right? Now you can take that gamble, or you can, like in my opinion, do not lock it up in phase two. Just take the tokens from phase one, sell them the very first day, and then you can look to maybe a month or two down the line, buy into Mars if you'd like to do so. I just highly doubt, and I would love to be proven wrong. I would love to be proven wrong, because if I could be proven wrong on this, then finally we have evidence to show investors within Terra, users, that, hey, there is a way for a project to launch on Terra And there is a way for them to present themselves. And there's mechanics in place that will actually not allow the tokens to get dumped. And now I get it. The more that people have my mentality regarding this, the more likely the tokens are going to dump, and that sucks. But at some point, I mean, you just get tired of being bent over, right? Like if you try to be the good guy and always say, well, I'm not going to dump, I'm trying to support this and that. The whale down the block that has, that's going to deposit 10 million USD into phase one, I mean, they don't care about that, right? They want to get those tokens, they're going to sell it, they're going to dump it on people on day one, and they're going to lock in, massive gains possibly on it, They might make, if they put 10, maybe they'll make, $6 million, of those tokens, and then whatever, a year and a half down the line, they'll withdraw their USD out of it. Like, they may very well do so. So to kind of stick behind what I'm saying myself, I'm going to come here. I am actually going to take 500 USD that I have here, put that here. Now, when you look at this right here, again, keep in mind, these numbers are going to change. The more USD that's being deposited into phase one will affect how much you are going to receive. Right now, it says that I would receive 0.005% of all the rewards in phase one. That's just based on the current USD that's being deposited into phase one. There's going to be more USD, so I would imagine this percentage will go to 0.001 and even lower, right? So these tokens, I'm not going to look too closely at them right now. So we have 546 days of putting 500 USD. So again, going off the math that I kind of shared earlier here, and let's say if I took that 500 USD and I put it into Anchor instead, right? If I put that into Anchor, let's say I would receive 100. So I would make about 150, right, from Anchor during that process. So I would hope, at the very least, that when I receive these tokens, whatever they might be, that I would have enough that I would be able to sell for about $150. That would kind of match up the same level of gains I would receive if I took that 500 and I put it into Anchor, right? If I make more than that, then that's great. If I make less, then I kind of got the short end of the stick there when it came to that. So let's go and let's click on continue here. We'll just check all these disclaimers, and we are going to provide the UST. And let's click on post. And there you go. So now my UST is locked up for the next, next 18 months, right? But again, my UST is locked up, but that UST will be earning some sort of yield, okay? So even in the calculation that we did when we compared it to Anchor, we did not consider that, which can change the numbers, but we also do not know what it's going to be. Because the one thing that Mars does have to compete against is the fact that Anchor kind of does allow people to borrow money too, right? And they do it by also subsidizing borrowers, right? They give borrowers ANC tokens. And as we look right now, actually, if you borrow from Anchor, then based on the ANC tokens that you'd receive, you actually come out ahead by about 3.54%, right? So it's almost like you're borrowing for free and even profiting from it. Now, as far as I know, Mars is not necessarily looking to kind of promote or incentivize borrowing. Maybe they will with their token, which again wouldn't be great for the tokenomics if they do so, but I'm not saying they are. I just haven't read about it. But they do have to compete against that, right? So they can't come out of some crazy APR on their UST, or in general, there may not be that much demand on Mars to borrow when you look at Anchor and you kind of can borrow it for practically free. So that's something to keep in mind, right? Anyhow, it's locked up. So again, I'm not going to participate in phase two. I'm going to wait for March 7. And as I said, there's a very good chance that I will take my airdrop and I will take my tokens from phase one and I will sell it on that day. Again, I know, kill me. I'm sure some people are going to dislike this video, but I'm just kind of telling you what would be the smartest play here. And then a few months down the line, that is when we can look at Mars, and that is when we can consider buying right back in. Because the price, I would say there's a 90% chance that the price is going to be lower 2 or 3 months down the line, as opposed to what the price will be on day one, which is March 7th. Now, if you enjoyed this quick little rundown, I would appreciate a thumbs up. If you have any questions, if you have some rebuttals, drop them in the comments below. I answer every single comment. You could also subscribe for more Terra-related content. Other than that, thank you for watching and have a great day.